Hess has a large wholesale energy trading operation that's fairly active in New England, and we sell a lot of gas and electricity and oil to industrial and commercial users up and down the East Coast, particularly the Northeast.
So to get on another line, it has been previously said that you would expect up to 70 trips a year of tankers, which would mean 140, one going in, one going out.
Right.
You now also discussed that you wouldn't have any of those trips potentially between Memorial Day and Labor Day.
On the weekends, during peak boating periods, in the daytime.
Okay. It's also been previously said that security would not allow for you to have those ships going through the bay during the night, but now you're saying you would prefer to go during the night.
I've never seen anybody in anything to do with security, and we've been involved in all of those discussions, say there's any prohibition going through the bay at night. That's one of those stories that has taken on a life of its own and has absolutely no basis in fact.
Okay.
I will point out, you probably noticed about 2 weeks ago there was a big kerfuffle because the terminal in Boston brought a cargo in from Yemen. That cargo docked at the Boston terminal at 4:30 in the morning. Well, I was up at 5:30 in the morning. It was still fairly dark outside. So they're running ships into Boston Harbor at night, and they have been for 15 years now. So nighttime transit is not an issue that I've ever seen or heard.
Yeah. I was just talking previously, I don't think they even knew I was coming to this meeting, to somebody who was at Boston Harbor when a ship came in over the weekend, this weekend. And they described it as a shutdown of the harbor with security throughout the region in which he was near the harbor. And he illustrated it as very disruptive to that area. And as I understand it, Everett is about where this ship, I presume, was destined, is about 3 miles inland. Is that?
It's probably more than that. I think it's from the entrance to the narrow part of the Boston Harbor is probably closer to 5.
Okay, 5 miles. There still is a, wouldn't you agree there's a different security concern and different logistical concern between 5 miles, which is the furthest inland to any facility we're talking about of these other facilities up and down the coast, versus the 26 miles that the Weaver's Cove facility would be?
Not necessarily. It's totally a function of the characteristics of the waterway, which is part of the Coast Guard evaluation process.
But it's a more complicated characteristic than.
Not necessarily. I mean, for example, let me point out one of the older terminals in the United States is located in Lake Charles, Louisiana, at the head of the Calcasieu River. Those tankers essentially make their way up a large ditch for close to 35 to 40 miles. And it's so narrow that they actually have to convoy ships in and out because there's no room for 2 ships to pass each other in the channel. So there are many more complicated, equally complicated, but differently complicated waterways around the country.
It seems less complicated if only one ship can go up and down.
Well, one of the things that makes, frankly, Narragansett Bay more attractive is there's relatively light commercial traffic. You're not worried as somebody running a large ship that you're going to run into a lot of other large ships in the area.
One discussion, I haven't taken a physics or a chemistry class for at least 30 years, but you described being able to demonstrate the non-flammability in a beaker. As I understand it through previous testimony, this LNG is pressurized to 600 times its volume in a gas state. You really couldn't make that demonstration in a beaker.
You could actually, because LNG isn't under pressure. When it's on the ship, it's actually at atmospheric pressure.
It's compressed.
No, it's placed through a refrigeration cycle that has a lot of compressors on it, but when it turns into a liquid, it's not stored under pressure.
But
there's no pressure in LNG. Now, and I'll give you, I mean, if you want, I'll give you my brief understanding of the physics.
But you couldn't reach into an LNG tanker and take out a beaker of liquefied natural gas.
No,
to
but
make
I
a
could bring
demonstration of
I
its-
could, if I had a long enough string and a beaker, I could do that. But I could also bring a thermos jug down here with LNG in it and pour it onto a Pyrex glass on the table. And I can point you to video websites that the industry set up. You can watch that happening. It's not under pressure. It's not like the propane tank on your gas grill in your barbecue. That's under pressure, and that's how that stays liquid.
So what do you need the pipeline that's pressurized in order to transport it for if it's not under pressure?
It's not pressurized per se, but you have to pump, when you put any liquid through a line, whether it's water through your garden hose, it could go through the pipeline.
So why are you using a very expensive pressurized pipe for no reason?
Well, let me try and, we're sort of switching subjects a little bit here, so let me try and do that. The pipeline is expensive not because it's pressurized, because it has very little pressure in it. It's expensive because it's made of very special metals, Invar steel, that will not expand or contract when the cold liquid hits it and is contained in it. So it allows you to move the liquid as a liquid.
So how cold is the liquid?
It's minus 260 degrees Fahrenheit and minus 160 degrees Celsius. It's cold.
That has something to do with the science that we're discussing, how cold it is then.
That's why you use special metals so that they don't crack or break under the temperatures.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Senator Miller. Senator Miller, I think one of his lines of questioning has to do with when he was doing all of the alternate energy, they kept saying, oh, you got to have some sort of contract, and then they wouldn't give him the contract for his alternate energy. I think he got a little frustrated along the way, and that's why he was asking if you have anything in place. Mr. Shearer, I appreciate, again, first, your coming here and talking to us today. I will tell you, and you seem to be a person who makes a good presentation. And it's problematic to me that you use certain phrases dealing with people that I know that are problematic to me. Okay? Misrepresentations, distortions, whatever. You're talking about my Attorney General. You're talking about the Quinnipiac Island Planning Commission, not committee, that I have probably worked with for over 25 years. That was actually a brainchild of some people in Portsmouth a long time ago. And I consider that you probably use these terms advisedly, that you are intentionally doing it. And I would suggest to you that it's not such a good idea, that you do not deride the folks who are, in fact, the ones we rely upon, including our Department of Environmental Management, including our Coastal Resource Management Council, when you are making your responses. Now, if they have been inaccurate, certainly you have every right to point out that inaccuracy. But again, I have been bombarded of late with certain information that, quite frankly, doesn't induce or is not conducive to a civil conversation between us about what's going on. Okay. The other thing, I will tell you that I have never been real confident in the methodology used by almost any energy provider and how they charge for their product. And that, quite frankly, sir, I know you are probably not at all responsible for, and yet you are in that industry. And therefore, I am obliged to suggest to you that I have no confidence level. I don't trust, I don't believe, for the most part, I don't respect the folks in that industry and the methodology they use to determine what they're going to charge me or anybody in this community. The other thing I have an apprehension about, and this is, by the way, not unusual for me. This is one of my long comments that might end up with something like, do you agree? And you can be prepared to say no, or elaborate further if you want to. But as Senator Miller indicated, every once in a while you have some event that occurs and you observe it and you watch it. Most recently, I watched a show on PBS about the aftermath of the Exxon Valdez